Today in our session, we have two people, Karen and Andy, joining us. As we dive into the divide today alongside them and through their particular story, they're going to be our teachers and our guides today, helping us all learn together. And for that, we're incredibly grateful. As we go into this webinar today, we remember that we're here in the Braver Angels way. That means that we're here to listen. We're here not to change minds. We're here to stay curious and to attempt to understand, not to win, but to have the kinds of conversations with goodwill that we know flows through all of us, even when it's hard to see. Today, we're going to learn some communication techniques and perhaps experience some aha moments for our own relationships with Dr. Bill Doherty. Bill is a co-founder of Braver Angels, and he's creator of the Braver Angels workshops. He's a professor at the University of Minnesota, where he teaches marriage and family therapy, somebody who's clearly been there and done it. Bill says, in our workshops, we stress that it's important for families and our country that we try. We have to at least try. That's the importance of this work, he says. There's no way out of this except together as one heartbeat. Bill today is going to work with our couple, Karen and Andy, who have volunteered to tell their story and help all of us learn new ways to manage our own political differences for the sake of our relationships. After Bill, Karen, and Andy talk together for a while, there will be a Braver Angels reflecting team consisting of two conservatives and two liberals who will share what they've observed, appreciated, and learned from watching today's session. So now I'm going to turn things over to you, Bill.
All right, thank you, April, and welcome, Andy and Karen. Now it's just us on the screen here. And I know that you're anticipating some bad weather coming through, not metaphorically bad weather, but really bad weather in Georgia. And so we've agreed that if your power goes out to your computer, that Andy, you've got your trusty iPhone there ready to go. So okay, so that's great. I as I mentioned to you before, we had 12 inches of snow here in Minnesota, but electricity seems to be working. So Karen, you gave me that look that only Southerners give at this point. Yes, we're hardy people here. All right, so just like to begin by asking each of you to briefly say why you accepted the invitation or why you volunteered to be part of this conversation today. Why are you here? Either of you can start.
Well, we're here to better understand, I guess, each other. COVID times have been really hard. We've been bipartisan family since we've been married for 18 years. And it's always had its challenges, but it's not really been a big thing. And between the election in 2016 and then COVID really just kind of really ripped us, that's strong, didn't rip us apart, but really exposed a lot of things in us. And I think this could probably help us come back together or look at it in a different way.
Okay, thank you. Andy, about you, why are you here?
Yeah, I'm all about trying to understand other people's differences, especially my wife. People think the way they do for certain reasons, whether they're older, younger, their ethnicity, where they're from, whether they're college educated or not, whether they're in the military or not. And everybody has their different beliefs. And beliefs aren't right or wrong, they're just what you have or what you feel. And if we can better understand each other and have conversations and come to the table, we haven't done that as a country. We've been divided for years, and it's gotten worse for lots of reasons. But as soon as we can have conversations and meet in the middle, personally, I feel that most of the country wants a lot of the same things, but you have to be over here or over here to run for office and polarize people, and we're not doing anything to unify. And I want to understand how other people feel and why they do, and just have a conversation.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. So maybe you could tell me about what the challenges, what kind of communication challenges you've been experiencing, particularly as you said, Karen, about since 2016 or COVID. I mean, what challenges are you having when you talk to each other?
Well, I'm actually a Yankee. I'm not a Southerner. I grew up in
Okay.
New Jersey, and I
Okay.
say that only because I tend to have, as the New Jersey people may know, a New Jersey temper. So I can get escalated very fast. I also tend to think I'm right. And so a lot of the times around COVID, I'm a nurse midwife by profession. So I feel like I have a science background and I want him to honor that science background. And sometimes I feel that that's not being honored.
Okay, well, as somebody from New Jersey, most New Jerseyites are right most of the time anyway, right? So this is so. So you're talking about your temperament, and then if you have some professional knowledge, even more so. Thank you. And so you're saying sometimes you kind of charge into that conversation in a too strong a way.
Yeah, and then Andy will probably say that he doesn't like conflict. I don't mind conflict.
Well,
you know.
let him say it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't mind. I'll just say I don't mind conflict.
Yeah. So conflict doesn't arguments don't trouble you like this. Okay. So Andy, just your initial take on what are the challenges that the two of you face.
Yeah, the challenge is I own a small business with 15 employees. It's an office, so we're not dealing with public coming in and out every day like a retail store, and trying to manage the lives of 15 people and their families, keeping them employed, and seeing things a little differently, trying not to overreact to what the media says, because I feel the media puts the fear of God in you when the reality is maybe not so bad. We had a family trip last summer where one of the kids was tested. We all tested before we went to the beach, outdoors, and one of the kids tested positive for COVID. And that's, I think, where the divide with COVID really started. Never had a symptom, nobody got sick, nobody had been around. And I don't see COVID as this end all be all that the world's going to disappear if we don't wear our masks 24/7 and not do things. We get shut in, and okay, we didn't get the flu last year either because we wore our mask and washed our hands.
So let me charge in a little bit.
Yeah.
If I could focus you for the moment on what happens in your communication.
Okay, the communication piece is I'm coming at it from a different angle as a business owner and trying to keep my employees and my business running. And I'm probably more flexible in.
So what happens between the two of you when you guys talk? That's where I wanted to drill down.
I probably shut down a little bit and just hear her, but don't listen. I think that's a husband-wife thing in general.
Okay.
But I try and take the interest of, hear what Karen's saying from the science side, but also how it affects my employees.
Okay.
And I probably don't communicate it as well how I feel about what's best for the business.
Oh, okay. Okay. So part of the dynamic then around things political, not just the COVID, is the pattern that, Karen, you're more apt to initiate the conversation?
I'm more apt to escalate it. And what I feel like is that he doesn't listen. He's already formulating his response, and his response doesn't always answer the question that I raised. But I guess some people would call it mansplaining, but I'm not sure that's what it is. So,
you're saying that he talks at some length, and what does that do? What happens with you then if he's explaining?
I get annoyed because I don't feel like he's explaining what I've asked. He's explaining something in his mind that answers the question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then what do you do at that point?
I get annoyed, and I'll either raise my voice or I will just say, we're not going to talk about this. And the kids have banned us from talking about politics at the table when they're home because it doesn't go well.
Okay. Okay. So on your end, you raise something, you pose a question from your point of view. Andy goes into too long a speech on it. You get annoyed. You go after. You escalate. What do you do when you escalate? What kinds of things might you say?
Do you know what I would say? I'm having trouble pulling it up in the minute the and one of the dynamics is that I'm grateful. We are a blended family. We are both divorced and remarried to each other. And I'm grateful for the life that I have been entitled to live being married to Andy. So I haven't always held my ground, but I'm wanting to more hold my ground and not just say, okay, whatever you say.
Okay, so you're making some personal changes that come up here, and so Andy, this dynamic that you guys are now talking about, what's hard for you in the conversations? I have a sense of what's hard for Karen in the conversations with you. What's hard for you in conversations with her? And again, not around a specific issue, but just around politics.
I guess the hard part is, for me, getting Karen to be open to listening to other ideas and opinions.
To your ideas, yeah.
Right, or others. I mean, even if it's something, a news story or an article we saw in the newspaper or online. Hey, this person thinks this, or hey, there's another viewpoint on X.
Okay.
And COVID obviously is the big one, but
Okay.
let's be open to a discussion. And I feel Karen shuts down to not have the discussion because she's right and there's no need to talk about it.
And so do you feel you're told you're wrong then?
In the old days, it used to be, yes.
Okay.
And politically, I see myself as a conservative, not necessarily a Republican.
Okay.
And my parents were, mixed political viewpoints, so I'm kind of used to that in the family. But let's have discussions. And there's one party's not right, one party's not wrong. And I feel like Karen isn't open to some of those other opinions that are out there.
And then when she doesn't engage, you try to explain, try to bring in more points of view.
Correct. And sometimes I just let things go and just don't even share them because I know it'll set her off.
And then you shut off, and sometimes you shut. So you guys end up shutting off because it's frustrating on both ends. Yeah. Okay. Well, you've done a nice job of describing the challenge. And now for the next part, we've agreed that you're going to have a conversation about COVID and business. As people are, it's one angle on something that people are talking about all over the country now, right? Is about restrictions and impact and what's the balance. So lots of folks in the country are having this conversation. And so what you're going to do for a few minutes now then is have the conversation as it usually goes. Okay, not that you're your best angels now, but how it often goes. And that'll kind of make more specific the general things we've been talking about, and then I'll offer some input. So if you could start, Karen, and start the conversation.
So I heard that New York is instituted mandatory vaccination for employees, for employers to have their employees vaccinated, and I support that decision. I think it's important for there to be not necessarily only public, but public-private. I think that the private sector owes it to their employees to keep them safe. And one of the ways they can keep them safe is if they, I don't want to use the word mandate, but they need to be vaccinated. So is that enough? Or
Well, however you normally do it, just have the conversation.
Okay. So
you're off screen.
Oh, so Karen, get in the screen.
Okay.
So my feeling is government telling private employers what to do is sometimes an overreach. And that's like a slippery slope. Will that lead to everybody getting a flu shot next year? Where will government stop? And it's like government sneaking its head under the tent of the private employer. I feel there are enough regulations and rules as a small business owner and everything I do that slow us down from administrative issues. And again, we're an employer of 15 people. We don't have the rules of family medical leave for employers over 50. And that government employees, if the government wants to tell its own employees to get vaccinated, great. In New York, they required first responders to get vaccinated. Many decided not to. I think people should be given a choice.
So that's okay to make first responders?
No, well,
no.
government employees.
Government employees.
They can do what they want with their employees, because I should be able to do with mine.
What about the safety of the employee? If you have someone who has, like we have an elderly parent, if their house and somebody in your office chooses not to get vaccinated, they're putting that person who has to work in your office at risk.
And my office is set up where everyone has their own private space. People can wear masks as they choose. Everyone is vaccinated. And I have one employee who does wear a mask even though she's vaccinated. And people can also work remotely in my profession too.
So let's take it out of your profession. What about you're in a big warehouse, or you're in a place where people don't have license to, or feel like they have agency, you know, they're fast food workers or whatever, or healthcare workers. They're in a situation where they are in an office space with someone who's not vaccinated.
And I think that needs to be taken up at the employer level, not the government level. And I think it's also in this economy, it's hard enough to find employees.
But
So if
wait,
you're gonna
why the employer level? What makes how is it fair that someone's putting their life at risk when there's a reasonable public health measure that can make the risk of exposure in the office, make those workplace safer?
So my direct response, this is where I struggle at times, more from a fact standpoint, is I think people should have choice. And again, if people don't
Well,
want to
what
get
about the
vaccinated,
people who don't have the choice? What about the people who have to have a job, they're vaccinated, and they have a immunocompromised or young children at home, and they have to go, so they don't have it. So you're taking their choice away by.
I think those people can wear masks and be accommodated by the employer to work in an area with other people who aren't vaccinated.
Accommodating
Oh,
by.
Okay, all right.
You don't let me respond to that. They can't always be accommodated.
Oh, so you're ratcheted up here.
I am ratcheted up.
Yeah, Karen's world is black and white, mine is gray.
Whoa, don't characterize her world. Okay.
Yeah,
So thank you. I just it gave me a sense of how it goes, and Karen, you were like, you wanted to get your last point in there, you know. He threw you up a softball. You were going to hit that out of the park.
yeah.
But somehow I think Andy would have had something else to say too. I think you two are actually pretty well matched in terms of, you know, two people who have strong opinions. But I can also see how it would be frustrating. The conversation looks a little frustrating, at least from the outside. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah.
And Andy, would you?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, employers accommodate.
Well, no,
employees
not the
all last
topic.
week. Yeah.
I'm talking about between the
I had
two.
to get my last, yeah.
Oh yeah, you guys are good. Yeah. Oh, see, if you get your last one in, I have to give her one more, and then we could just spend the whole time. But it gives me a sense. When I say you're well matched, I mean you know you can butt heads well. But at some point, if we kept going, one of you, I'm guessing, or the other would just give up. Right?
I would give up.
You would give up. Okay. How typical was that conversation, or were there some features in conversations that happen regularly that were not in this one?
I think it was pretty typical.
Okay. Now, Andy, you didn't talk at length though, and this one, as Karen said, you sometimes might. So was that
Nothing unusual. I mean, I get defensive more so than
okay?
a lot of people. So I tried to stay away from that and just voice my opinion and share what I feel.
Okay. So how typical, Karen, in your viewpoint, was this conversation for the two of you?
Well, it's pretty typical. I mean, it's full disclosure. We actually went for counseling during COVID because it just became unmanageable. So we didn't learn some techniques that have ratcheted it down. But I would feel like he would keep explaining, and then I'd be like, forget it.
Okay, so at some point, because the two ways I could see you each may turn off the other two and they click off would be, at least in this case, Karen, you're hanging in there, more questions, more challenge. And then at some point, I'm guessing Andy may give up on that. And then another one would be, Andy, you try to explain things and, bring in evidence and facts. And then at some point, then you click off, Karen. So we didn't allow it long enough to see the end point. So I really appreciate your just showing what you do here, right? And so I have a couple of thoughts and questions. And to start with, Karen, when you raise a topic like this, when you bring it up, what are you hoping will happen? What's your goal?
That's a good question. I mean, in my heart, I would like for him to understand my world, which has always been in public health.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I just don't think he understands that.
Well, would understand mean he agrees, do you think?
Probably.
Okay. Yeah, understandable. I mean, if I feel strongly about something and it's part of my world and something I care about, if I bring it up, I want to be understood and also agreed with. And so I think that leads you to come across in a way that suggests that there's something wrong-headed in his views. In other words, you begin with communicating the message, you're wrong about something important, Andy.
And I also don't think that, like, I feel so connected to the healthcare workers that are like in the hospitals.
Yeah.
And so this issue, it goes bigger than the businesses. It's empathy with these people that are struggling.
Yeah, we just were joined by Doug, who will now go off his camera here, Doug. Doug is going to be one of the reflectors later, so you'll have to, there we go. Okay. So I get this issue is really, it's personal for you, not just professional. I'm really wanting though to focus on the fact that you two are a married couple with a lot at stake in terms of your relationship. As I watched the two of you, it felt more like a public debate than a talk between two intimates. And beginning with, again, understandably, Karen, you wanting to convince him about something that's really important for you. And what I can say is that hardly ever works in marital relationships. Hardly ever works. When somebody has strong views on something themselves, and they feel like their spouse is saying, you gotta hear me and change your mind, almost everybody digs in. Almost everybody digs in. It would be as if he were initiating the conversation to get you to see that these public health measures are infringing on freedom and business. And it was, if he started out that way, I'm inviting you to imagine how you would feel like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And sort of dig in. And so that's how it often, a lot of times in marital communication, the starting point, how somebody leads off and then the other person's first response, it's sort of like tennis, serve and then the return to serve. Things are going to go badly from there on, depending on the first two steps. And so on your end, Andy, when you hear from Karen, her strong view on something that is different from yours, if then your response is to counter, in other words, she says up and you say no, down. She says hot, you say cold, right? If your first response is to counter argue, as opposed to acknowledging what she said, then you guys are off to the races. Because the way it goes is you make an argument, Karen, hoping he'll see the light. He said, that's not right. Here's what's right. And then you counter his counter, and then you're off you're off to the races. Does that make sense as an initial way to think about this?
It does.
Yeah, and what I heard you say, Karen, is you want to feel understood, and then of course the hook in there is for most of us to feel understood means you agree. But really, being understood does not necessarily have to mean agreed with. Doesn't ultimately, right? It just, right? So what I like to suggest is when either of you brings up something, to try to ask yourself, why am I bringing it up? Do I just want to express a concern about what's going on, but understanding that my spouse here is probably not going to see it that way. But I want to get it off my chest because it's worrying me. And just to let go, just to let go of whether he agrees with you. That's hard, but it's possible. And then what your contribution there, Andy, would be, and again, this is hard as well, is to first acknowledge what she said. You know, so I get for you, Karen, given the work you do, given that, you know, your world, this really troubles you, and I can see where you'd want to have businesses, you know, shape up here, right? If you were to do that, Andy, the likelihood of Karen softening in the conversation would be, I think, pretty high. I mean, tell me that, Karen. Would that be helpful to you if you acknowledge?
If he acknowledged, give me more.
Acknowledge your feelings about it. No, just acknowledge that he heard this is important to you.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. Depends how it's said,
Of
because
course. Of
yeah.
course. Yeah. But most people soften a bit if they feel acknowledged. Then it has to feel real, and you could decide on that. What would be for you, Andy? What would be the advantage of beginning with an acknowledgement, or I hear you on something? What would, for you in the conversation, how would that be helpful, do you think?
I think it might take some of the emotional component out of the discussion and make it more of a issue-based discussion. And yes, this is how I feel, but somewhere to meet in the middle, maybe.
Yeah, well, one of the things about the middle, see, when you're debaters, and that's you're effective. I mean, you're both good. I was, you know, if I was a debate judge, I would, oh, there's a one for you, there's a good one for you. That's why I say you're well matched. But when married couples debate and don't give ground on something that's important, and this is important to you guys, it tends to create bad feelings. You know, boom, boom. And one of the two important ways to avoid that, and one of them is to acknowledge that you heard somebody before you respond. And then the other one is to look for something you can agree with. Because as I heard your conversation, I heard an area you both agree with. Agree on. I heard, maybe I was wrong, but you both said government as an employer ought to be able to, you know, the healthcare workers and all those hospital workers in New York, the government ought to be able to, if it's their employee, if it's their employees. That's what I heard you say, Andy. And so that would be a really important time to say, okay, so we agree on that. There's a lot of healthcare workers who, you know, if their employer, whose government says they need to get vaccinated or whatever, yeah, they should do it. That would have been another moment of like, okay, we're actually agreeing on something, because not everybody has something to agree with here, but you both. Another thing I both heard you say, this is an important issue. This the vaccine, you know, the COVID effects. I mean, all this is really important, and just even acknowledge that this is hard and this is important is a way to connect on something, as opposed to boom, 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 boom. Any thoughts about what I've just said?
And finding points where we do agree is very helpful, and just to stop and pause and work from there.
Yeah.
Don't start with the differences, start with where we agree.
Yeah, and even if you are doing differences at the beginning, listen for something you agree with. and then and then bring it up. Because what it does is, what I'm saying is, for a married couple, you have a life to live, and you have this relationship, but looking for some way to soften your disagreements so that you feel like you're sort of, you're still on the same team, even though you differ on this. And to not do it like you would with a stranger in a public debate where you're being scored, where there's who's so another thing that, Karen, for you is just as sometimes Andy may go on at length, right? You ask these questions almost like the prosecutor. Isn't it the case that, or how could you say such and such? Isn't that contradictory, right? Does that make sense? That and when you do those questions again in a court or in a debate, those are great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those, right? You are not being mean or disrespectful, but in a marriage, gotcha questions like, I just caught you in a contradiction. Don't you see? Okay. Then what do you think, Karen, the effects of those gotcha questions would be on what happens in your communication?
Not good. I guess I've learned, one of the ways to effectively communicate would be with the gotcha questions, because he goes on for a while.
Okay.
So it's like a quick in there, but
okay,
I hear why I shouldn't be doing it.
Okay, and why is that?
Because it's antagonistic, and that's not the way to come at the conversation.
Yeah, and it encourages him to be his worst self at that moment, right? So it's sort of like, okay, let's take the gloves off. Yeah, it's the downside is that if you have enough of these, too many of these conversations, it kind of erodes some good feeling between you, right? It just sort of and you don't feel like you're kind of in the world together in the same way.
Yeah.
I think starting from a point of consensus and working from there is better than starting out here.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a few rounds to find any, but if you're looking for it, okay, you may start out disagreeing, but if you're looking for something you can agree with, that's one. Another is to acknowledge you both have personal and professional experience behind your views. It's just not just hypothetical. And to acknowledge that, Andy, you have a business to run in a world of regulation, and that's hard. And Karen, you've got this career in public health, and you see this stuff all around you, and there's an urgency you feel. Okay. Those are your starting points, and those are real, and they lead you to some different conclusions, and just feeling acknowledged, just acknowledge that these are debating policy points here. You guys are living this and living these worries and fears. It's personal in that way, in a good way. It just keeping that in mind as you talk. And then I guess the last thing I'll say in the summary, and then I'll see if you'd like to have another conversation, is to try to let go of the idea that you're going to persuade the other person to come fully around to your side. That to have a goal of being able to explain yourself, and that the other person may have something to think about. Okay, but to give up this idea that in a conversation, they're going to say, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? You are right about this. It hardly ever happens. But over time, if we listen to each other, most of us, we do have some influence on each other over time, and as we take it into account. But in a particular conversation, giving up on, like, I got to get through. I got to have the other person see the light. Okay, so you want to try it again?
Same issue?
Or different.
No, same issue.
Same issue.
Yeah, the
Oh,
same
sorry.
one as before. A COVID in business, and nothing has to be perfect here, right? So just given our conversation, just spend a few minutes talking, trying it a little differently.
So based on what Bill was saying earlier, we do agree about.
Oh, no, it actually start
Effort.
all over. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You start us. So Karen, you start. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that the restrictions in New York City that they're mandating vaccination for employer, and I may be citing this wrong, but employers are mandated to, or employees are mandatory vaccinated. Let's talk about that.
For all employers for their employees.
Right.
Do you know what the consequences are for those who don't do that? Are there consequences?
From the business perspective.
What's government going to do if the employer doesn't require their employees to have vaccines? Are there penalties, fines?
So that feels like a zinger you just came out with.
I'm just asking. Well, I'm also saying New York's different than Idaho and Colorado. You know, every
Okay,
city,
so let me intervene a little bit. So
jurisdiction.
I'd like you to actually get something out, Karen. In other words, you just introduced the topic. So to make it realistic, why don't you just get into it, and then
Okay.
Andy, try to connect with her first before you
Okay.
take it in another direction.
Right thing. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I really support mandatory vaccinations for business. I almost don't care if it comes from government or it comes from business. I think business has more power than government at this point. So I think businesses should mandate vaccines.
And I understand where you're coming from with your background in public health, and you're wanting to limit this disease as much as possible. Vaccines to me are one way of doing that. There may be other ways. And I feel that it also puts an imposition on business to monitor who's vaccinated and who's not. There's a lot that when government does X, Y happens. And requirements like this, I feel, might trigger employees to say, hey, screw it, I'm not going to work anymore. So now the employer is maybe out of business because he's lost 40% of his employees. And I don't think that was government's intention. But when government says X, something else will happen. Unintended consequences. So to me, there's got to be a better way to protect.
So let her in, Andy. Let her in.
Okay, go ahead.
Now I forgot what I was gonna.
Well, so just acknowledge what, yeah.
So I can hear that business has it will have repercussions for business owners if they mandate and they lose employees. And I guess from my perspective, health safety of the employees is more important than losing employees. But I guess maybe there's a way, like Delta in Atlanta it has a surcharge for people that aren't vaccinated or something. There's ways to maybe do a partnership or testing. So if somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated, but who would pick up the cost for that testing? Do you make the employee pick up the cost, or do you make the employer pick up the cost?
Testing to me is different than requiring a vaccine. I hear what you're saying. And yes, Delta, I think, was charging us a couple $100 per employee for who wasn't vaccinated because their health costs were going to be higher. But as a small employer, that's not really practical. And having an employee show proof of vaccination, that's great. But I think for those, for whatever beliefs, don't want a vaccine, should be given some flexibility to work independently, separately from home, where they don't impact others. I'm in an office. That's different than a restaurant,
Right.
where you're interacting with the public.
I just feel like I hear what you're saying. It does put a lot of stress on the employers. I just feel that if someone's refusing to be vaccinated, that then they have a responsibility to their fellow coworkers, and that that responsibility could be met if they took a weekly test, and maybe they're supposed to bear the burden of that test.
And I hear you on that. And I feel the person who doesn't want to get a vaccine has other issues and doesn't care about their fellow employees anyway. Because if
Okay,
they did, they would probably get a vaccine or be more careful.
so true. So what would be the in making them pay for a weekly, if you're not going to get a policy, if you're not going to get vaccinated, you need to pay for a weekly test, get tested weekly and
And I think employers would lose a percentage of their employees and risk remaining in business. And I don't think that's the government's goal, is to have employers shut down because the employees aren't getting tested.
I don't think it's the government's goal either. You know, I wish I almost said, I wish you could see it my way.
You said that on
Look, that's good. Oh, you caught yourself. That's great. Look for something you could agree on here before we end the conversation.
Something we could agree on.
I agree in the interest of safety that people should be vaccinated, period. For those who choose not to, for whatever reason, they need to be dealt with, I think, individually, not in a broad sweeping government intervention.
Well, but you're looking for something you can agree on here. So if reach out to her. So say something you think she might agree with.
Not even what's for dinner. That doesn't always work either. But no, I feel that employee safety is first. And I think that's the goal here. Correct. Protecting fellow employees and customers that they interact with.
Mhm.
Do you really? I mean,
I do. No, I do.
okay,
That's what the mandate's for.
Okay.
I feel. But is the mandate the only way?
Yeah, you're looking for, so see if you agree with him, what you might agree with, Karen.
I can agree with you that employee safety is the paramount utmost importance. So that's what we're agreeing on, employee safety.
And the mandate to me is one way. There may be others. And I'm not bright enough to know all those answers, but
Yeah,
every
so
industry to me is going to be different.
yeah, you just agreed on the goal and you don't necessarily agree on the means.
Right.
Okay. In your prior conversation, it wasn't, I would have to listen really hard to see that you agreed on the goal. I mean, I knew you did, right? Yeah, obviously you care about safety, but
Well,
here
I actually didn't know that we did. So this has
Okay.
been helpful.
yeah, so good. So how did this conversation feel different? Again, not talking about the issue, right? But how did it, so keep going then, Karen. How did this conversation feel different?
I'm just surprised that we actually can agree on things in this. So, you know, it's surprising. So,
And what happened? What did you do different that helped you come to a point of agreement, do you think?
well, I think we had to really look for something that we could agree on.
Mhm.
And I think we both had to like expand our thoughts about it. Let's find what we agree on and then build on that. And then once eventually it's going to separate, but we don't have to talk about the separation. Let's just stay in the core thing that we agree on.
Mhm. So what was different here, Andy, in the conversation for you?
Yeah, I think we listen with the goal of trying to understand each other rather than pushing each other away.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that I was trying to convince her, but I was trying to hear her, interpret it in my own mind, and then come back with, well, let's make this a goal. How do we do this?
Yeah,
And
I could
looking
see.
for a consensus more so than how can.
Yeah, neither of you seemed like you felt like you had to back down or give up some core thing, and you both did a lot of acknowledging what the other said, and that just makes for less escalation if you slow it down, acknowledge first, and look for something you can agree on, and because a lot of times we agree on ultimate values, it's complexity of how to get there. And the getting there is important. So and in fact, there's a creative tension there, in what you're saying, universal mandates and versus, business and independence and freedom. So you're grappling with all that, but you're grappling it felt more and more collaborative way. That's what it looked like to me. Okay, well, great. So we're going to move to our reflection team now. You guys you've done your work here, and now others will do their work. So our team will come on the screen, and there is April, and then we'll have our others. Doug, hi Doug, and Chris. And Barbara should be joining us any second. There we go. All right. So For those of you who have not been on the webinars before, these are folks who are both Reds and Blues, who are just going to share what they took with them, what they learned, what they appreciated from listening to Andy and Karen in our conversation. And we're going to start with Barbara, and if you could just address Andy and Karen.
I want to start out by just thanking you for being here and for being so open and honest and upfront about what you've been dealing with. I'm also in a mixed marriage, and I'm just listening to you talk, and you were so honest and real about what the issues were that I could even sort of feel a little tension in my chest as I was thinking about times when I've shut down. When the conversations got difficult. So I really, really appreciated that. Couple of things that jumped out at me. You know, when you were, Karen, when you were talking at the beginning about wanting him to respect your experience, honor your experience was the you used the word honor. And I was thinking about just how visceral this all feels when you disagree about a topic. It can feel so personal, and that really came through with what you were sharing, and you both talking about how it affected you. When you revisited the conversation after discussing your dynamics, the thing that struck me is so powerful was the effort you put into restating what you were hearing, because you both used the phrase, I can hear what you're saying. And every single time I was kind of like worried that you were going to say, but, right? I hear what you're saying, but you said, I hear what you're saying. And then you would make yourself stop, sometimes visibly, and restate it. And that just shows that you were listening and not just formulating your next argument. And it was really powerful. Even when there was that moment of, I hear what you're saying, what you said was, but it was something really amazing to watch. Thank you for being here.
Okay, Chris.
So again, I'm going to echo Barbara's comments. Really, I think especially in the follow-up conversation where you really did take that pause and say, I hear what you're saying. It was dramatically different than what we saw in the first conversation. Just that little teeny tool to use once in a while can totally change the conduct of a conversation and the outcome. I will say, just personally, I felt very sympathetic to both Andy and Karen. Karen, I'm a physician, so I know a lot about COVID. And Andy, I own my own clinic, so I run a small business. So I'm very sympathetic with both sides of it, and I've never had that quite the argument inside my own head, but I certainly understand where you guys are both coming from your perspectives, and really appreciate you sharing your problems with communication and I think solutions.
Okay, and April.
Yeah, this reminded me so much of conversations that I have with my husband that I don't do well. And although he's on the same side of the political aisle as me, we have very different opinions about many things. And so the things that I thought about as Bill was talking to you and as you were redoing, I noticed that you all, when you did your redos, you really used a lot of I statements. And it became, I feel that, I may be wrong, or I think this, and as opposed to that argumentative prosecutor tone that Bill was talking about. And I really like that. And then the fact that you found something that you had in common that you didn't realize you had in common, that was beautiful, to be able to think about that and to build on that. You know what your whole conversation reminded me of at the beginning, because I could just see myself in doing this with my own spouse. I felt like you had the boxing gloves on at the beginning, and you know, and with being well matched, what Bill was saying is so true. And then, but as you were reframing and looking for, acknowledging the importance of the topic for the other person and your own acknowledging their experiences and not just trying to persuade them. It was like you took the boxing gloves off, this just like physical thing off, and all of a sudden your hands became open to the other person. And that was just beautiful to see. And it reminded me of what I need to do in my own relationship. So thank you so much for giving us that gift today to be able to see that.
Okay, and Doug.
Hi, Andy and Karen. First, I just got to say up front, I'm just really, really stirred up by this whole thing. And in preparing for this session yesterday, I listened to the recording of another one of these sessions that Bill led with a much younger couple who are kind of just making a life together starting out. They don't even have children. They haven't made the decision yet to become parents. And they are very, very divided about their issues on gun culture and gun control, incredibly divided over that. And it was just, I'm still processing what I listened to yesterday. And full disclosure, I've been married to the same woman for 32 years and together for 37, and she's very different from me. And all of this has been making me reflect really deeply on my own marriage. And, I know that what's enabled us to be together in the first place was a deep level of communication that built a certain trust. She's a very different person than me, although we have pretty much political confluence, but completely different. And now kind of centering into this conversation here, I mean, I heard two different conversations. They were just worlds apart. And the first one was, like April said a moment ago, kind of more like a sparring match, and somehow the second one, I just heard, like, by arriving at a common core of agreement, at least something fundamental, it kind of lessened the escalating tensions, like I'm not being heard or the need to speak over each other and all of that stuff. There was like a settling of energies, and somehow the conversation fell into place in a way that enabled something to come to light that both of you could recognize. And I think that is at the nucleus of maybe why you're together. You're listening to each other and making a life together. And how could that possibly happen if you aren't able to have that level of listening and empathy and respect for each other? I mean, that's kind of grafting my own words about my own relationship into this, but that's the only model I have. And I'm really just learning here. I mean, I've been part of Braver Angels for 3 years, working night and day with college students, but to watch what Bill is doing here, my colleague, leading this into a deep, deep dive into personal relationships is just an exponential experience for me. So I appreciate your courage in participating. This is a very important session, and it's really groundbreaking work for Braver Angels, and I'm very moved by it.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So Karen and Andy, final words, what you're taking with you from this experience?
Well, what Doug just made me think of is you're better off when you talk to people, not at each other. I think in the beginning we were talking at each other, and the second run we were more talking to each other.
Yeah.
And step back and take a deep breath, and because we deeply love each other, let's put that as the foundation to work from there, not cause things to stir it up.
Yeah.
I know you all are grateful to us, but I mean, in an hour, this has been going on for almost 2 years now, and it's real. I lost my mom to COVID, and it's real, and it's been tearing me apart. But now we'll say, well, Bill says, it's like, and that's what we'll do. And I think we can navigate through whatever this winter, it's going to be a crazy winter, and whatever this winter brings, we'll have the tools to navigate. So I'm speaking for both of us, which I shouldn't do, but we're grateful to you all for letting us participate in this.
Yeah, well, and we back, and let me leave you with a couple more tips. One is that you won't always have me around.
We have your phone number. You gave us your cell number.
That's any hour of the day or night. It's a Braver Angels service.
Yeah.
And so you will slip into old patterns inevitably. And what I suggest you do is usually just one person slips first, right? One person puts the gloves on first, you're having a bad day or whatever. And so what I encourage you to do is to maybe try something like, oh, let's not put the gloves on. So something to signal, oh, let's not go there. We can do this better. Not, by the way, you can do this better, or not, you take the gloves off. No, that's not a way to do it. But let's not put the gloves on, and let's try to do it differently. So you can pull out of if it looks like you're into going into a rabbit hole. You can sort of say, oh, let's not go there. Let's pull back. No blame in it. And then, because you clearly have the ability. I mean, people are, giving me all kinds of credit here, which is lovely. But you guys were not hard to work with because you have the capacity. When I said acknowledge each other, look for something, you just did it. You just did it. Okay, so you have the capacity, and I'm sure you do it in other aspects of your relationship. You do it in other aspects of your life. It's a matter of making sure when you disagree politically, you executed here in this most important relationship. If you find yourself slipping, remind yourselves, okay, let's try it differently. Let's look for some common ground. Let's acknowledge first. Take a breath, because you can do it. But you won't always do it right, and somebody will slip. Just try to pull out without blame and say, let's try it again. I mean, in my own marriage, sometimes I'll say, can we have a do-over here? Okay. We started out badly, and let's take a breath. There's enough forgiveness, and then back up and try it again. So once again, for everybody, my goodness, this is some of the best way for us all to learn is from a particular experience, not abstract principles. Okay, so that's what you gave us, is your experience, and you were willing to have not your greatest conversation in front of all of us, which is risky and beautiful when you can do it, and then you could show us how to do it better. So much appreciation. And back to you, April, to take us out.
Yeah, wow, this has just been so wonderful to be able to participate in this with all of you, taking the boxing gloves off and holding each other's hands in this process. A beautiful picture of that. So thank you, Karen and Andy, again, for your candidness, your openness, your curiosity to be willing to participate in this way. And then Bill Doherty, again, for your work with Braver Angels, but also for facilitating this dialogue today. It's beautiful to always learn. We've had a wonderful behind the scenes tech and organizing crew also that I just want to thank. That's Mary Beth, Randy, Abe, and Stan. So you all didn't see their work really, but they made this possible. And then Barbara, Chris, and Doug, privileged to serve alongside of you as the reflecting team today across the political aisle. For those of you who came today, we're all in this together. You're helping bridge the political divide by being here today, by thinking about how we can build these kinds of things in our own relationships. For more on Braver Angels and how you can get involved, more about our mission of bringing Americans together across the political divide, check out in the chat the Braver Angels links that are being put there. There's lots of resources there. You can go to braverangels.org, sign up for our newsletter, join as a member. You can participate in workshops, debates, public forums, one-to-one conversations, film discussions, so much more. I think about 3 years ago when I joined and where I am today in my own abilities to communicate in my own relationships. And so much of it is because of the work of Braver Angels that I've been able to participate in. I realize there's so much more to learn and there's so much more to explore. So I am alongside of you in this journey. This just remind me though, that if you and a loved one would actually like to volunteer to participate in this, a future one of these, helping loved ones divided by politics, let us know. There's a link in the chat box for you to sign up to volunteer. We'd love to hear from you to do that. We also end each one of our events with the opportunity to provide feedback. We are an organization that likes to be continuously improving. So on the screen, you can hover your phone over that QR code if you would like to, and it'll open up a link for you. There should also be a code that's in the chat for you to take a look at if it's easier for you to open it up that way. We'd love for you to fill out that survey right now. And we're going to actually give you some time to do that and have you listen to another Braver Angels song by one of our Braver Angels songwriters. And this one is called Not Divided. And the songwriter singer is Stephanie Sweet. This song is about 4 minutes long. That should give you plenty of time to fill out the evaluation form.
I will not be divided from
sister, brother, neighbor, spouse, wherever
Did
we
you know
are,
there is a potent
wherever we are, we have some things that we can do together. And that's what we're reminded by today. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. We hope you have a great weekend. We hope to see you at another Brave Angels event in the future or another Helping Loved Ones Divided by Politics. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.